I'm Judy Shaw for NYSE Floor Talk. Joining me today is Tomeka McLeod. She is BP's Vice President, Hydrogen US. Tomeka, it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you. So now, Tomeka, tell me, why is hydrogen important for the future of energy?
Well, in order to meet the Paris Climate Agreement that many companies and governments and everyone around the world are trying to achieve, we really need hydrogen because there are many hard-to-abate sectors. When I say hard to abate, I mean big industrial players such as steel, refining, ammonia, as well as things like the airline industry, shipping, that it's really going to be hard to use any of the other technologies that currently exist, such as electrification or any other ways to decarbonize. So if we really want to be able to do that, we're going to need hydrogen as part of the toolkit as well, in addition to those other technologies.
All right, now tell me, why have you prioritized the US as a place to grow your hydrogen business?
Well, so when we think about where it's going to really be important to do hydrogen, one, we're looking for places where, one, you've got all of the resources that are available to do it. So for the US, we're blessed to have both. In order to be able to do hydrogen that's produced from natural gas and reformed into hydrogen with the CO2 captured, we've got the good geology in order to be able to permanently capture and store the CO2. But also when we're talking about hydrogen via electrolysis, and that's where you take the water molecule and you split it into the hydrogen, into the oxygen as well. And so using a renewable source to create hydrogen, we're very advantaged with the renewables that we have. So good solar, good wind, and even offshore wind is something that's being looked at for the US as well. So when we take those two to pair it, as well as really favorable policy, I think you know that the US has been a leader in that aspect, and particularly with the Inflation Reduction Act, which has helped the US become very much more competitive relative to some other geographies. So taking all this together, we see the US as a place where we can really do this. It's very strategically located for export as well. And so with the potential not only for domestic, where we have lots of domestic demand and needs for decarbonization, but also as we think about exports into other markets such as Europe or Asia.
All right, and what types of projects, hydrogen projects, might we see in the US, and where might we see them?
Well, so for a company like BP, we actually have a bit of an advantage because if you think about us today, we already have assets that we need to decarbonize. And so in the US, for example, we're starting with refining because as I said, refining is an industry that it's really hard in order to be able to use electrification or other technologies. But we actually have 2 refineries in the US. So we have a really large refinery in the Midwest called Whiting Refinery. So what we're trying to do is look at what we could do to decarbonize our own refinery. So is there an opportunity now to replace the hydrogen that we use today, which is hydrogen from natural gas. It's called gray hydrogen. But we'd like to replace that with clean hydrogen. So we're looking at how we do that. And we actually have applied as a part of a consortium called MACH2, the Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen, for government funding in order to be able to support us in doing that. And then we're also looking in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a refinery called Cherry Point. And for that refinery, what we're looking at is there the potential for us to produce sustainable aviation fuel? And so that's sustainable aviation fuel that could be used, for example, at the Tacoma, Washington airport to help airlines to decarbonize as well. And so with that project, we'd be looking to replace gray hydrogen with green hydrogen. So hydrogen made from renewables, but once again, to reduce the carbon intensity and carbon footprint of that ultimate product.
All right, and finally, what financial, technical, and regulatory challenges remain for scaling up hydrogen and CCS?
Well, so the biggest challenge obviously is the cost of producing hydrogen is very high. And so if you save $5 to $6 per kilogram today, the Inflation Reduction Act helps quite a bit. So it does start to narrow that gap. But one of the things that we're seeing obviously is there has been some inflation in the market. So on the renewable side, for example, for some of the equipment that's going to be required to produce renewables, like the solar panels and the other parts of the kit, there has been inflation. So we need that to come down. For the electrolyzers, which is going to be really important for producing green hydrogen, we also need the learning curve to come down quite a bit. You need it to be halved at least in order to make these projects economic. We don't have the infrastructure in place. So the transmission grid is going to need to be built out. Permitting reform, because right now permitting takes too long. I mean, if we really want projects online by the next second half of this decade, we're going to need to really reduce that permitting process to get it down quite a bit. So those are some of the big challenges we see. These are projects that are, each project billions of dollars of projects. of cost. So we need to make sure that we have different things in place in order to be able to get companies like us to actually move into this industry and actually get it off the ground.
All right. Well, Tomeka,
Yeah.
wonderful to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on Floor Talk.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Judy.